Something is unfolding beneath the quiet surface. And if you have been sensing it lately, it is not simply your imagination. A final, weighty decision is slowly forming in their heart, and somehow your presence is woven directly into it. On the outside, they may appear calm, distant, or emotionally detached. Yet a truth they once avoided has become far too heavy for them to keep ignoring. This is not only about missing you, it is about what this connection awakened within them and what it has forced them to face. They are standing at a major crossroads, and every direction they consider somehow leads their thoughts back to you. For a long time, they attempted to distract themselves with routine, noise, work, pride, and emotional distance. They believed that silence would eventually weaken their feelings and make everything easier. But some connections do not disappear with time. The more they tried to suppress what they felt, the more their inner world treated it as something meaningful, unfinished, and impossible to fully release. Now they find themselves looking back, questioning the story they told themselves for so long. A deep shift is taking place inside them. One side of their heart feels pulled toward you with an undeniable force. The other side resists, because accepting this truth requires vulnerability, honesty, and the willingness to let go of old defenses that once protected them. They are finally sitting with their truth, wondering why thoughts of you continue returning during quiet moments, and why nobody else has ever truly replaced what they felt with you. This is the difficult space that exists just before clarity arrives. It is the place where the mind can only resist for so long before the mask begins to crack and the truth starts showing through. If they return, it will be because they finally recognized that a connection like yours is not something they are likely to encounter twice in a lifetime. And if they choose to walk away, it will never mean that you lacked value or importance in any way. It will simply mean that they were not prepared for the level of honesty, growth, and inner transformation that loving you required from them. That is why your role right now is not to chase them, not to force outcomes, and not to try to control what happens next. Allow truth to reveal itself naturally and in its own timing. Let time uncover what words could never fully express before. What is happening inside them carries real depth and significance. It is not a passing uncertainty that will disappear after a few days. It is a complete internal struggle that continues growing stronger. On one side, there is an emotional pull toward you, filled with memories, warmth, longing, and a deep sense of belonging that feels rare and special. On the other side, there is an old, protective voice, shaped by previous disappointments, painful experiences, and the fear of being hurt again. That voice tells them to stay guarded, remain distant, and protect themselves no matter the cost. These opposing forces are colliding within them, and the pressure created by that conflict is becoming more difficult to ignore with each passing day. They may try to lose themselves in everyday responsibilities and routines. They may stay busy from morning until night. They may act as though none of this affects them anymore. Yet the more they push these feelings down, the more those emotions rise back to the surface. Because the real battle was never outside of them. It has always existed within their own heart and mind. That is why the next step they take carries such importance for their future. You became a turning point in their life without either of you fully recognizing it at first. Even if neither of you understood it completely in the beginning, something about this connection challenged the walls they built over the years to survive emotionally. It reached the version of themselves that existed beneath control, beneath appearances, and beneath all the carefully constructed protections they relied on. Now they are facing a choice that cannot be postponed forever. They can continue living within the limits of who they have always been, or they can step into a new version of themselves. That version requires courage, openness, emotional honesty, and a willingness to take risks that once felt impossible. This internal struggle is exhausting them from within. It reveals itself through the inconsistency you may have noticed. It appears through the push and pull, the movement between closeness and distance, the moments when they seem ready to move forward, followed by sudden withdrawals that leave everything feeling uncertain again. This is not always manipulation or mind games. Sometimes it is simply what happens when someone deeply desires a connection, but fears the transformation that naturally comes with it. As this pressure continues building, it begins burning away the illusions they once held. They can no longer convince themselves that you were merely a brief chapter or passing presence in their life. They are being pushed towards seeing you with greater clarity than ever before. More importantly, they are being pushed towards seeing themselves differently as well. Old memories are returning with renewed strength. Shared experiences are resurfacing with an intensity they did not expect. Every silence seems to carry more meaning now. Every absence feels heavier than it once did. This discomfort is necessary because genuine decisions are not born from avoidance or escape. They are formed when confusion starts clearing, and the heart becomes unwilling to remain hidden beneath fear. And that clearing is happening now, even if it remains invisible on the surface. There comes a point when uncertainty becomes too heavy to carry. They are approaching that point steadily. Not because something dramatic has changed externally, but because the human mind cannot remain divided forever. For too long they tried managing their emotions by minimizing them. They told themselves it was not that important. They convinced themselves it would eventually fade. They assured themselves no action was necessary, but something deeper within them now understands that this is no longer true. That realization is bringing everything to the surface with increasing force. Emotions this profound rarely disappear on command. They continue growing in silence. They evolve even during periods of separation. They remain patient until a person can no longer deny what exists within their heart. Now those emotions are returning in waves. They appear late at night. They emerge during quiet pauses throughout the day. They rise through memories they never expected to revisit so intensely. They show up in the stillness that follows a busy schedule. They are beginning to notice how naturally their thoughts drift back to you, again and again, without effort, without intention. Your presence remains like a quiet echo in the background of their everyday life. Distractions no longer erase the feeling that something meaningful is missing. The activities that once occupied their attention are no longer providing the same sense of escape. Your absence has played a powerful role in this process. By stepping back, you left them alone with their own thoughts. That silence became a mirror. It forced them to face the missing comfort, the missing spark, and the emotional safety that your presence once provided. When they finally experienced the true shape of what was gone, they stopped asking themselves whether it mattered. Instead, they began comparing the depth they felt with you to the emptiness they found elsewhere. Inside them, fear and desire have now collided with tremendous force. On one side is a warm, instinctive pull toward you. On the other is a powerful fear of losing control and reopening old wounds that never fully healed. Yet for the first time, their desire is beginning to speak louder than their defenses. This creates an intense inner storm that leaves them caught between moving forward and retreating once again. They remain trapped within this hesitation, not because they do not care, not because the connection lacks meaning, but because they are enduring a private battle that is pushing them toward a significant breaking point. This is no longer only about a relationship. It has become a defining moment in their personal journey. It is about deciding who they want to become and whether they are willing to live honestly with what they feel. If they appear more unsettled or distant than usual, do not automatically interpret it as an ending. They are beginning to realize that remaining in the exhausting middle ground has cost them their peace. Being neither fully present nor completely gone has become harder to maintain. They are being forced to take responsibility for their emotions. They are being challenged to decide whether they will continue choosing safety or whether they will choose growth. The hesitation that once felt protective has gradually become a prison. The walls they relied upon are beginning to crack under the weight of truths they can no longer ignore. They are remembering the moments when they remained silent despite wanting to speak. They are recalling the times when pride stood where honesty should have been. They are reflecting on opportunities that slipped away because fear convinced them to stay hidden. The distance between what they feel and what they do is becoming smaller. The gap is closing naturally. Real change is becoming not only possible, but increasingly necessary. When someone spends enough time alone with their own thoughts, truth eventually rises above the noise. It rises above distractions. It rises above excuses. It rises above carefully crafted stories. That is exactly what is happening in their inner world right now. The truth is no longer whispering quietly from the background. It is becoming impossible for them to ignore. Every day that passes adds a little more weight to what they already know deep inside. Every memory carries a lesson. Every moment of reflection reveals another piece of what they have been trying to avoid. They are discovering that some feelings cannot be reasoned away. Some connections cannot be dismissed through logic alone. Some people leave an imprint that remains long after distance enters the picture. Whether they ultimately move toward you or continue resisting what they feel, one thing is becoming clear. They are no longer the same person they were when this journey began. The connection has changed them. The silence has changed them. The absence has changed them. And now they stand at the edge of a decision that feels larger than anything they have faced before. The choice before them is not simply whether to reach out. It is whether they will continue living according to old fears, or step forward into a version of themselves that values truth over protection. That is the real crossroads they are approaching. The pressure inside them continues building because their heart knows a decision cannot be delayed forever. The longer they remain between two worlds, the more exhausting it becomes. Eventually, something has to give. Eventually, clarity arrives. Eventually, action follows awareness. And as this process unfolds, they are beginning to understand something they resisted for a very long time. The connection was never the problem. The feelings were never the problem. The real challenge has always been finding the courage to face what those feelings asked of them. That realization is growing stronger every day, and whether they admit it openly or continue wrestling with it in silence, the truth is steadily finding its way to the surface. This is not coming from outside pressure or someone else's influence. It is emerging from an inner shift that grows stronger with every passing day. They can no longer hide behind uncertainty the way they once did. If this message reflects exactly what they are experiencing, then the connection has become too present in their quietest moments. It keeps appearing whenever everything slows down around them. It returns when they attempt to focus their attention elsewhere in life. And this repeated return is accomplishing something important within their awareness. It is changing how they view the story of your connection over time. What once seemed like isolated moments now feels like part of a meaningful pattern. What once appeared confusing now feels filled with purpose, significance, and depth. They are beginning to understand that they were not simply missing a person from their life. They were missing the version of themselves that came alive around you. A version that felt more open, more authentic, and more emotionally connected than they were accustomed to being. The pain of living far away from that version of themselves has become too strong to ignore. It continues growing quietly beneath the surface until it can no longer be dismissed. This marks an important turning point in their journey and in their understanding of what truly matters. So understand this clearly and without hesitation. When someone begins missing who they became with you, the question is no longer whether the connection mattered. The question becomes whether they are willing to return to the truth it revealed inside them. As this awareness deepens further, the outer world begins losing some of its power to distract them completely. They can stay busy with endless activities. They can surround themselves with people. They can throw themselves into work, ambitions, future plans, and constant noise. Yet beneath all of that movement, there remains one quiet current, leading back to the same place. Back to you. Back to what was felt. Back to what still remains unfinished between the two of you. This is the stage where the protective ego gradually begins losing its grip. The ego wants distance, it wants control, it wants certainty and safety at any cost. Yet a deeper part of them is starting to understand that complete disconnection carries its own form of pain. It creates a kind of emptiness that cannot be filled by distractions alone. Sometimes that emptiness becomes heavier than the fear of closeness itself. Sometimes the loneliness of staying guarded becomes more uncomfortable than the vulnerability of opening up. And that realization changes everything. Now they are carefully weighing two possible futures before them. One is the familiar life they know well, along with its emotional limitations and quiet emptiness. The other is an unknown path that carries risk, uncertainty, and exposure, but also the possibility of something genuine, meaningful, and deeply real. For the first time, that possibility is beginning to feel more valuable than the protection they once sought. This is where courage starts taking root within a person. Not when fear disappears completely, but when truth becomes more important than fear itself. With that awareness comes a quiet stillness that begins settling the restless energy within them. The pressure remains, but it feels different now. It feels steadier, more focused, more honest than before. They are no longer fighting every emotion that arises within them. They are beginning to let those feelings speak clearly. They are starting to accept that what they feel is genuine, and that acceptance brings a subtle sense of peace into their heart. Not because everything has been solved or resolved, not because every question has been answered, but because the inner conflict is slowly transforming into inner clarity. Direction is replacing confusion. Understanding is replacing resistance. They are standing at the edge of an old version of their life, looking toward a new possibility that feels unfamiliar, yet strangely right. The only bridge between those two realities is a single, honest choice that they must eventually make. This is the moment of transparency and self-reflection. The silence that once protected them is now reflecting them back to themselves with honesty. It is revealing where pride blocked love. It is revealing where fear stood in the way of truth. It is revealing where avoidance created distance that never truly needed to exist. They find themselves revisiting conversations, memories, glances, and pauses from the past. But they are doing so with more maturity than before, more awareness, more emotional depth, more understanding. They can now see where fear made many of their decisions in the past. They can also see the value of what was naturally trying to grow between you. They recognize things they previously overlooked. They notice truths they once ignored. This is not only about regret or looking backward, it is about rearranging what truly matters in their life. The things they once placed above connection, such as image, control, emotional safety, and self-protection, are beginning to feel empty when compared with the depth of something authentic. Another important shift is happening within their heart as well. Empathy is growing steadily inside them. They are beginning to understand what their distance may have felt like from your perspective. They are starting to recognize the emotional weight you carried while they remained uncertain and withdrawn. That understanding softens a person from within. It humbles them gently. It makes it more difficult to hide behind emotional coldness, because once responsibility enters the picture, everything changes. They are no longer reacting only from fear. They are beginning to become the author of what happens next. They are becoming more conscious of their choices, more aware of their actions, more intentional with their direction. When someone reaches this stage, everything becomes more serious in a meaningful way. Not dramatic, not chaotic, simply serious, because they understand that whatever happens next will reveal something important about the person they choose to be. The final layers of hesitation are beginning to dissolve. Old thoughts of should, could, and maybe are losing their influence. In their place Something stronger is forming within them. A sense of must is emerging. They must acknowledge what is real between you. They must face the consequences of what they truly feel. They must stop wasting time in emotional paralysis that keeps them standing still. Time itself is beginning to feel different now. More valuable, less endless, more precious than it once seemed. They are realizing that remaining stuck is also a decision, and often the most painful one in the long run. This clarity is not only happening in their thoughts, they feel it physically. It appears as a quiet pressure in their chest when they think about reaching out, when they imagine speaking honestly, when they consider taking a real step forward. The unknown still frightens them. That fear has not vanished completely, but the familiar emptiness of remaining disconnected is beginning to frighten them even more. And that is why movement is drawing closer with each passing day. Words that were once held back are rising toward the surface naturally. Actions that once felt impossible are becoming increasingly difficult to avoid. The truth has become too strong to remain buried forever. Because once truth reaches this level of strength, silence no longer feels safe. It no longer feels comfortable. Instead, it begins feeling unbearable. Remember this important point. Whatever they do next will not come from a random impulse or sudden emotional reaction. It will come from a long, difficult, and deeply honest process of finally facing themselves without excuses, avoidance, or hiding. That is why this moment carries so much significance. It is not a temporary feeling that will simply fade away. It is a reckoning that changes a person. Slowly at first, quietly at first, then all at once, when the time finally arrives. At the center of everything stands one undeniable truth. You changed something within them in a lasting way. You reflected a part of their potential back to them. You became a mirror that showed them possibilities they had forgotten. You became a catalyst for growth. You became a steady point during a time when they felt lost in uncertainty. Even through silence, your impact remained present. Even through distance, your influence continued shaping their awareness. That is why they are now reaching a deeper level of understanding than ever before. The noise is fading gradually. The path is becoming clearer with time. The question is no longer whether this connection affected them deeply. The question is when they will fully act upon what they now understand. Layer by layer, their confusion is falling away. In its place is a quiet certainty that feels grounded and impossible to ignore. They are realizing that trying to control their feelings only made those feelings stronger. Pretending not to know the truth is no longer a realistic option. If you have been sensing this profound shift, trust what you are feeling. Something very real is reaching its final stage within their heart. It is asking them to decide whether they are ready to live from a place of truth rather than fear. Your role during this moment remains simple. Stay centered, stay calm. Resist the temptation to chase what is already being brought into the light naturally. Allow them to feel the full weight of your absence. Allow them to recognize the true value of your presence. Allow them to understand the cost of pretending they feel less than they actually do. The person who once hesitated is approaching a line they can no longer cross back and forth forever. Their inner conflict is slowly becoming clarity. Their confusion is gradually becoming purpose. Their uncertainty is transforming into understanding one step at a time.